I used to work the night shift at a county morgue just outside Baton Rouge. It was 2009, and I was in my early 20s, taking whatever jobs I could find after dropping out of college. Working alone in a morgue at night might sound like a horror story in itself, but I actually liked it. Quiet hallways, cold storage, and a routine that rarely changed. The only things I had to deal with were paperwork, inventory logs, and occasionally helping transport bodies to and from the cool. Most nights were uneventful. Until Halloween week, when I met what I still struggle to explain to this day. The body came in around 6 p.m., male, probably mid-30s, found collapsed in an alley behind a soup kitchen downtown. The paramedics who brought him in weren't exactly talkative. They just said he was a likely overdose, no ID, no personal effects. I did the intake like always. Pale, thin, skin starting to go cold. I zipped him up in the body bag, labeled him a John Doe, and wheeled him into Cooler Bay 3. Nothing unusual. That was until around 2:15 a.m. when I heard a heavy metallic thump from inside the cooler. Now, I've heard plenty of things working there. Pipes knocking, freezers kicking on, the occasional shifting of a gurney. But this was different. It wasn't a random bump or groan. It was repetitive. Thud, thud, thud. Like someone was banging on the inside of the cooler door. I froze. Then I tried to rationalize it. Maybe something fell over inside. Maybe a shelf slipped. But the noise was steady, deliberate. I grabbed my keys, unlocked the cooler, and pulled open the door. It was freezing in there, but the moment the door opened, I could feel the air shift, like a pressure drop, and then I saw it. One of the body bags was moving, not twitching, not subtly shifting like gas escaping or rigor mortis setting in. It was thrashing, writhing, like something alive was inside it, fighting to get out. I felt my stomach twist. My first instinct was to unzip the bag, but something in me screamed not to. I took a shaky step forward and asked, Are you alive?" The bag jerked violently. There was a sound, low, guttural, a groan that sounded like a mixture of a growl and breath being forced through clenched teeth. It chilled me straight to my bones. I slammed the cooler shut and locked it from the outside. Then I ran back to the office and called 911. I told the dispatcher there had been a mistake, that someone might have been brought in alive. She sounded skeptical, but dispatched a medical team anyway. I waited by the door, pacing, my eyes locked on the cooler as if it might open by itself. When the medics arrived, we unlocked the cooler and slowly unzipped the bag. The body was still. Cold, lips blue, pupils dilated. Dead. One of the medics checked his vitals and shook his head. Time of death was confirmed, but there were fresh scratch marks inside the bag, long, deep gouges in the lining, and blood under the fingernails. He had been moving. He had fought to get out. I never worked another night shift after that. I don't know what happened. Maybe he wasn't really dead when he was brought in. Maybe it was some drug that slowed everything down to the point where even machines couldn't detect a pulse. But part of me, the part that still dreams about that groan and those claw marks, knows something else was in that bag. And whatever it wasn't human anymore. In 2020, when the pandemic first hit and hospitals were overwhelmed, I was working as a trauma nurse at a mid-sized hospital in rural Texas. We were understaffed, under-equipped, and running out of beds fast. To deal with the overflow, the administration reopened an old wing of the hospital, Block 6. It had been closed for over 15 years due to asbestos and water damage, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The place was straight out of a horror film. cracked walls, exposed wiring, and long, dimly lit hallways that echoed with every footstep. It smelled like mildew and old bandages. The elevator didn't work, so we had to use the back stairwell, which hadn't seen a coat of paint since the 19th. Patients were moved in slowly, mostly those we couldn't identify or who had no family. They were locked into rooms with basic medical monitoring and checked on in shifts. There was one patient I'll never forget, room 616. Male, maybe mid-40s, with no ID, found unconscious in a train station restroom. He wasn't responsive, just laid there, staring at the ceiling, breathing shallow but steady. His eyes were sunken, pupils massive, and his skin looked almost gray under the fluorescent lights. At first we thought it was COVID or something neurological, but none of the tests came back with anything useful. He had no fever, no cough, no signs of infection, just stillness. Like something had turned him off but forgot to finish the job. On the third night, I was on shift with 2 other nurses doing rounds. The camera feed from room 616 went black, static, then nothing. We had problems with the wiring down there, so I offered to go check it out. I remember walking down that hallway, feeling like something was pushing against me. Like the air had weight. I reached the room and opened the door slowly, flashlight in hand. The room was completely dark. Not even the emergency light was on. I called out gently, "Sir, are you okay?" No answer. I stepped in further, and the beam of my flashlight swept across the empty bed. He was gone. Before I could react, I felt a presence behind me, a sudden shift in the air. I turned, and he was there, inches from me, eyes wide, mouth hanging open like he was about to scream. But no sound came out. He lunged. He wasn't slow, he wasn't sick. He moved like an animal, teeth gnashing, fingers clawing at my arms and shoulders. I screamed, trying to shove him off, but his strength was inhuman. He didn't blink, he didn't speak, just growled and snapped his jaw like he was trying to bite into my neck. Another nurse came running and managed to pull him off me. We shoved him back into the room and slammed the door. He didn't stop. He hurled his body against the glass, hard enough to crack it. His eyes were dead, but he was filled with rage or hunger. I don't know which is worse. They sedated him with a triple dose. He died 6 hours later. But here's the thing. His autopsy showed no drugs, no viruses, no organ damage. Nothing that would explain the strength, the aggression, or the decay in his tissue. It was like he had already been dead, but refused to stay that way. I still dream about his face, and the way he looked at me. Like I was food. In 2014, I was part of a volunteer group that helped reclaim and clean up old abandoned buildings in Detroit. Most were schools, libraries, and houses that had been left to rot, overtaken by nature or decay. One week we got assigned to an old medical college. It had been shut down in the mid-1980s. After funding collapsed and rumors spread about malpractice, the building was 4 stories tall, complete with a dissection lab, lecture halls, and underground tunnels used to transport cadavers from a nearby morgue. By the 3rd day of cleanup, we had cleared most of the upper floors. That's when someone discovered the tunnel. It was hidden behind a half-collapsed supply closet, metal stairs leading straight down into darkness. It wasn't on the blueprint we were given. Naturally, we were curious, so 4 of us grabbed headlamps, masks, and ropes and made our way in. The air was thick, humid, and smelled like rust and rotting books. The tunnel stretched for what seemed like forever, lined with old gurneys, rusted scalpels, and oxygen tanks that looked like they hadn't been touched in 40 years. Then we found the doors. Steel doors, locked from the outside with rusted chains and padlocks. Some of them had words scratched into the paint. "Stay out." "Unstable." And one door had a message that still gives me chills. "Don't open. Moves at night." And of course, we opened it. Inside was a small room, dirt floor, broken ceiling tiles, and a single gurney in the corner. At first, we thought the room was empty. Then one of us shined a light in the far corner. There was something huddled there. It looked human, mostly. Pale grayish skin, tattered medical gown, long black hair covering its face. It was rocking back and forth slowly, muttering in a low tone we couldn't understand. At first, we thought it was a squatter, maybe some drug addict who'd been living down there. But when we called out to it, it stopped and turned around. Its eyes were gone, just empty, blackened sockets. Its mouth opened slowly in a grin so wide it looked like it had no jaw hinges. And then it crawled, sprinted on all fours toward us, shrieking like a wounded animal. We ran. One of us dropped a flashlight, and it rolled toward the thing. In that split second of light, we saw its legs bent wrong, like they had been broken and never healed properly. But it was fast, too fast. We barely made it out of the tunnel and sealed it with whatever we could find. The next morning, the city declared the building structurally unsafe and condemned it. But sometimes, when I walk by that block, I swear I hear something scraping under the ground, something waiting, something that never should have been woken up. And those were 3 true zombie horror stories. Encounters that remind us the dead don't always stay dead, and sometimes what comes back isn't entirely human. These weren't tales of movie monsters, or fiction born from imagination. These were real moments, real places, and real people who came face to face with something that defied science, reason, and nature. From the icy silence of a morgue freezer to the sealed door of a hospital's forgotten quarantine wing, to the decaying tunnels beneath a shuttered medical school. Each story was a brush with something that should have stayed buried, but didn't. So the next time you hear a thump behind a locked door or feel a presence staring at you in the dark, ask yourself, what if it wasn't just your imagination? What if it was something that had once died, but wasn't quite done? If these stories chilled you to the bone, let us know in the comments which one haunted you the most. And if you've ever experienced something similar, something unnatural, you're not alone. We read every story you share, and who knows, yours might be next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories that crawl under your skin and stay there. Until next time, sleep with one eye open, and whatever you do, never trust a quiet morgue.